Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Star Wars Lads prediction speculation for Andor. We are talking about the finale this week, episode 12. We will be giving you all of our thoughts and predictions on what we think might happen in the last episode of season 1 of Andor. Before we do so, though, please hit that like button down below and subscribe to our channel for continued Star Wars content. We try to give you guys the best Star Wars content we can, and showing your support by subscribing will really help us out. Comment below, let us know what you think will happen in the finale of Andor. We always read and respond to all of your comments, and you guys give us a lot of great predictions so far this year. If you haven't checked out our review of Andor episode 11, that is up on the channel. Our reviews drop every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific time, so make sure you check that out. And we will be dropping our episode 12, our finale review, Wednesday morning this following week here, the week of Thanksgiving. So let us get into our Andor episode 12 predictions and speculations. We usually divide this video into 3 different parts. And that's kind of been because the show has been so spread out with a lot of different characters in a lot of different places doing a lot of different things. But this episode should centralize. So I think we will still divide this episode in 3 different parts. But I think instead of talking about Luthen at the end here, let's talk about Luthen, the Rebels, and Cassian in this last episode. I think they're all going to be together here on Ferrix. Sanak, what are your thoughts on what might happen here with the rebellion on Ferrix from the, I guess, the hero's perspective?
We know that he has a conversation with Clea in code. So there's a good chance that he just jumps straight to Ferrix. I think it would be interesting if he came back to Coruscant first and then kind of met up with like a Mon Mothma and a Clea and all these other players that are a bit more Coruscant focused. If there's a way for Dedra to be immediately tied into that story, is if Luthen arrives back and then somehow, some way, we have Cyril see this man again, identify him. For him to have said that line like 7, I don't know how many episodes it's been, of like how if he saw him again, he could identify him. I think it'd be pretty important for Cyril to find him on Coruscant so that whatever happens at Ferrix is just immediately explosive instead of like we wait for Dedra to kind of catch up. Because if you're giving Luthen any opportunity to slip away, he's gonna be fine. If we are setting up Luthen to be a character that doesn't continue into the second season, I think he'd be interesting to have like a final parting meeting of like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing with this money and sacrifices. Now you understand what I've been doing. And I'd like to see them voice a final disagreement, separation of like what their values are and how they'd like to lead the rebellion. Because at the end of the day, Mot Mothma leads the idealized rebellion that Leia picks up after, that Luke and to a degree Han picks up after. Luthen is more of the Cassians, the Melshis, all the characters that we sacrifice in Rogue One. So I think it would be pretty interesting to have that split formally made. Because I don't see Mon Mothma play a role in Ferrix. It's just more of her role with Luthen. So and what's going on with her family and what sacrifice she finally makes. I know your opinion is that Luthen is someone who kind of shapes and molds Cassian moving forward, and I could definitely see that. I still am of the opinion that this would also be a pretty good exit point for Luthen in the series, especially because Skarsgård is such a big actor. Maybe he's not willing to commit for Matt Port more than a season. I maybe the bait that he lays specifically to bring in Cassian is that he knows where his sister is. He knows he has something concrete because you don't put that for 3 episodes and then just abandon it to have like this connection of having just lost someone and then to now possibly gain someone back in his life could be what really pushes him over the edge. And then we'll be on Ferrix. I think it'll be explosive. I just don't think we've really seen anything from the finale. I know there've been a couple of leaks, but I think we'll keep that off of our predictions because that might be a little too spoilery.
I'm gonna go one of 2 ways with Luthen. I see both what you're discussing with the return to Coruscant. I think that is very likely, especially with this abrupt cutoff with Clea, because she's so adamant about him returning. I could see him coming back, or at least having some form of meeting with her. Then maybe that's where he finds out that from Lonnie that Dedra will now know that Cassian has escaped this prison. She knows that that is now the new trap for Cassian, that it is there. Like everyone is expecting him to return for this funeral. And Clea through Lonnie, now they all know it's a trap. Like the ISB knows and is setting and preparing for Cassian's return. So I could see Luthen going one of two ways. I could see him going, well, I got to get Cassian because I can't let them take him and I'm going to head back to Ferrix. Or I could see him constantly dealing with it the whole episode until about, second half of the episode, maybe final third of the episode when he comes in and helps save the day, or at least helps Cassian escape. Because ultimately, while this rebellion, I think, will be successful in the sense that it will cause death to many Imperials, it will be explosive, many people will hear about it. It's ultimately going to be quashed by the Empire. The rebels will get the moral victory of our voices are finally heard. We're finally standing up to the Empire and showing that there are people out there willing to fight. And I would love to see him go to Ferrix a little earlier. I'd love to see him be somebody that Cassian can kind of reach out to and use as a kind of a crutch, somebody who he can also blame for being like, if you didn't make me go on this mission, my mom might still be alive. I would like to see it be Luthen. I'd like to see their dynamic furthered personally before they kill him off. I really think that if they killed him off in this episode, well, it might work in some aspects. I still think Luthen is too mysterious of a character and a character that we still are a little supposed to be a little distant from, that I don't know if I'd feel the full weight of his sacrifice if he was to die in a heroic manner in this episode. I'd really like to see it furthered next season and him become like this new father figure for Cassian. Like you said, things aren't just put in episodes for no reason. Lonnie is going to come back in this episode. There are going to be things that are just pulled across all of these episodes. And maybe it is his sister, or at least the card of his sister, that maybe keeps Luthen alive. Maybe Cassian, he's teasing Cassian, like, I know where your sister is, but you're going to have to come with me. I do think the Ferrix conflict will be action packed and explosive. I'd like to see some more guerrilla tactics, some guerrilla warfare. There's going to be a lot of like stuff like that that's going to happen in this episode because this is not an organized rebellion. These are just people revolting. And I think Cassian, the weight of Marva's death will really hit him in this episode, especially when he returns and talks to the rest of his friends. The other person we didn't really bring up in our review, but was in a scene with this episode, was Bix, who maybe her capture, either Cassian is going to try to get her out as one of the people that he feels like he can still save on his home planet since he lost his mom, or since she's trying to identify, they're trying to get her to identify Luthen, maybe she's the one that identifies Luthen at the end of the season one, and that kind of spirals Luthen's like secret identity out of control where he can't go back to Coruscant. I think there's a lot of pieces there that we've shown throughout all these episodes where they're just small scenes, like 1 minute scenes, 2 minute scenes here. This is the episode that's going to have to tie all of that in. I think this episode's really going to do it. The show's so tightly packed and so tightly written. I truly believe that this will be a great finale. Let's talk about the Imperial side, though. As you brought up Cyril and his role with possible Luthen sighting. We also have Dedra and, of course, the shot we've been talking about with the trailers with the Death Troopers. We have not seen the Death Troopers yet in this show. So that shot obviously has to be in the next season, next episode, unless it was cut completely. But I would love to see that Dedra and the Death Troopers. And we are going to have them kind of cracking down on Ferrix here. Cynic, what are your thoughts on how the Imperials are going to approach this whole Ferrix revolution?
Oh, I don't know. I again, this is not a rebellion per se. Like you said, it is a revolt. I mean, we're gonna definitely hear these people on Ferrix banging the metal plates again. Maybe there's a new intonation. Maybe the big guy on the tower also gets involved. I'd love that to like really encompass the gravity of the situation, right? If even the bell tower guy's involved. I think that shot of her landing with the death troopers coming off the ramp, it feels like it should be like nighttime on Ferrix or something. Could also be here on Coruscant because it looked very gray. I need to see it again. And I think this is, I don't know, like we said in the review, there's no real payoff for what happens in the prison escape in the last episode because that's not really the focus, but you kind of have to make it the focus. So I think we're going to see a lot more about what's going on there. I would think, it's being that she's on Coruscant, that she'd have Cyril engage with her, uh, give her some sort of heads up, or at least follow Cyril. Maybe she's keeping tabs on him, knowing that he is such a wild card. So either way, Cyril is, I think, the impetus for why she's back on Ferrix. Personally, for me, I just want her to play Cyril. I want Cyril to be like ultimately this wasted, vengeful character who's only like a stepping stone for someone else. Maybe he's the first one who causes like the whole gunfire to happen, right? Tries to shoot Cassian and everyone just like jumps him or something, and it just becomes all out chaos. But everyone just unleashing all their tension and pressure of this imperial occupation. I'd like to see him go down as doing something so reckless, so dumb, like a lot of characters do in Star Wars, like the guy who killed Ulick in the Tales of the Jedi comics and stuff like that. There's always a dumb Star Wars character who does something without really thinking about it because they're so convinced of their reasons and all that. So I'd love to see him fail and fall apart, which is very much in contrast with what we're pegging him to be, like maybe this foil to Andor for the next 2 seasons. I don't think Dedra dies in this. She's just way too competent of a villain to die off in a Ferrix revolt. But I could see her possibly demoted, possibly things not go her way, and she has to face severe consequences, and she becomes like a recurring character instead of like a main villain again. There's a lot that the season finale has to do with. The more I think about it, I'm really curious what they're going to focus on, what they're saving for season two, especially with how season two is going to be structured out. And I think this is one of the first shows from Star Wars that I can't really put my finger on what's going to happen with different people because there's so many of them and they crisscross and intertwine that the actions of one person who may have never met another person could dictate that other person's fate, and that's a credit to the writing because I really can't tell which string will result in which collapse, essentially.
The Imperial section of this, I think, could either be one that is intriguing or one that is just extremely simplified for the sake of the story. I think we could be putting our heroes here at the forefront, which personally would be fine with me. I think the point of Dedra's character has come across so far this season, and I do think she's going to be another foil for the remainder of the show throughout season two, and probably until the end of season two. Our new Imperial character, to where she can be put in situations with possibly a Tarkin in season two, or a Krennic in season two, or a Vader, or somebody who we know, but she's our attachment to the Andor storyline. And Cyril as well. I would have bet money definitely that Cyril would have died by the end of the show. Not 100% sure now. I think the lack of Cyril throughout most of the second half of the season has been really a big surprise after both the marketing was heavy with Cyril appearances and the first 5 episodes were heavy with Cyril appearances. I think his arc could wrap up nicely in this probably fiery death that he will bring on himself. Well, I could see him dying by Imperial hands personally because kind of like Krennic, the thing he's devoted his life to is the thing that ultimately gets him. Like he's trying so hard to get Cassian that maybe the Imperials are like, you messed this whole thing up. We're gonna kill you. And he's like, I I've done everything for you, kind of thing. Where we already seen his loyalty to the security corps, but I could also see him being saved for next season as like a third chaotic force. We got the Imperials, we got the rebellion. He could be almost an even like more aggressive empire, somebody who thinks the empire doesn't go far enough. I could see him building his own faction in some ways, almost like the reverse Saw Gerrera in a way. So finally, the last arc, and most likely the one that doesn't really tie to Ferrix at all, maybe the aftermath of what happens in Ferrix at the very end. Like we've seen her react so many times to a lot of the things that Cassian or Luthen has done. But Mon Mothma's storyline seems like it's going in a very different direction. And you talked about a possible split between the two. I also concur. I think we are going to see the split between the two of them. But where Mon Mothma's story goes after that is going to be really interesting personal family dynamics. So, Sonic, what are your thoughts on where Mothma is going in this episode and how she'll end this season?
Yeah, I mean, to reiterate again, the family is a mess. It's like the most formal gaslighting. It all seems like it's set up for maybe Amon Mothma to, after a meeting with Luthen or something where she splits off, encourage this meeting and participation. Maybe this is her last way of like connecting with her family, bringing them all together, or sending her daughter off to be connected, and maybe sending her child and her husband to Chandrila to oversee this wondrous ceremony and then leaving them there. I could see something where she subtly is like, parent, like let's be a couple for our daughter's sake until the marriage, and then you do you. You guys live on Chandrila. This life isn't necessarily what you wanted. In a way, it also adds a little bit of a layer of how, like, yeah, she's doing this because she needs to keep her family away, but she also does care for her family. And if this is like the final way of protecting them, so be it. I think she's just gonna be a watcher, honestly, for what happens on Ferrix. Maybe she has a conversation with Clea or someone, and maybe that's where she like kind of takes over for the direction of what's happening on Coruscant. It's really about Mon Mothma after it's pushing her family away, about reorganizing the rebel activities on Coruscant to her benefit, to her privacy, until she deals with the Gorman sacrifice. I don't think we're gonna get anything more with that either for the rest of the season. So I think it's really just about her witnessing all the other storylines unfold, and then finish her personal stuff off, and then kind of become the big honcho on Coruscant with presumably like a Luthen void, because I don't see Luthen surviving on Coruscant for like 2, 3 more years. I think that could be a pretty interesting way of dealing with Mon Mothma without her necessarily being a player with Ferrix.
Ah, man, I could see it not really going the way we think because even if her family was to return to Chandrila, they could be prisoners basically if she once she reveals herself. And I almost feel like that's where we're going to start out with her in season 2. Will just be post Gorman massacre with her in the rebellion. Like maybe it's a recreation of that scene just from a hollow from somebody watching like a Luthen watching. I think her daughter is going to get married to this kid. I think when she finds out the offer has been on the table, she's going to be upset at her mother for not pushing it forward faster. That will leave a bit of that power dynamic there where I mean we see the look she gives her in this episode her daughter gives her. I could see her husband dying in this season finale. I could see him being the person that goes. Maybe he's a victim of the Imperial brutality that's brought on towards possibly in her involvement with Luthen, maybe some type of connection. The driver has been a big part of this season. Something to do with the driver could be the case. I think something has to happen with her husband though, because the daughter can get married off and we can, not really see her again or see her in spurts throughout next season and their relationship still be kind of distant. I don't think too much Imperial action would be taken against the daughter, but I doubt the husband could get away with anything and he doesn't really know anything unless for some reason in this episode it was revealed that he does know something and that maybe he is one of the people that acts on Luthen. There could be different angles there, but something has to happen that splits up Mon and her husband, and that either needs to be his death or something that causes him to completely turn against her to where he's now completely Imperial friendly in their eyes. I think that'll be the case. I don't think the split between Luthen and Mon Mothma will be amicable. I do think it's going to come from Luthen. I think Luthen is going to shut the door in her face and she's going to be like, what about all this money I gave you? Now I'm in this huge hole all because of you. I think Clea is going to have something to do with that. It might not even be a face to face with Luthen. It might be a face to face with Clea, but she's going to be completely betrayed by that. I think this is my wild swing, but I think she's going to turn to somebody else who she knows has some anti-imperial sympathies. I think this is where Bail Organa could enter the show. And I know this show hasn't really taken those swings for like, yeah, let's bring in all these characters but they're so joined at the hip through this whole thing where Bale is the first senator we see in Rebels before we see Mon Mothma, before Mon even makes her big announcement. Bale's been, in the trenches with this longer. Maybe it's Bale who either reaches out to her or she turns to Bale when she's ultimately under pressure from the Empire, and that's how she's sent on her new direction. And then it will be even juicier to when we lead up to their reunion between Luthen and Mon in season 2, when she's eventually forced to work with all of these different parties. I'd like to see that because they reference that in Rogue One that they've tried to work with Saw Gerrera before. They've tried to work with these other factions before, but they're too extreme. I'd love to see some type of cold reunion from them in the future. But that's going to have to be sparked by whatever Luthen does to her in this episode, because I really think it's going to be Luthen just kind of driving that knife into the relationship. So I think that's going to conclude our predictions speculation for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. As I said at the beginning of the episode, our episode 11 review is up on the channel. If you've not checked out our thoughts on episode 11 of Andor, please check out our review. And episode 12's review will be out Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. You'll want to check out our review as soon as possible to hear our thoughts on the finale. And then we will be talking about season 2 predictions further with the new evidence that we get from next episode for what will be happening in next season of Andor. Then we also have a review of the High Republic Convergence coming out this Monday. It is a day before the book comes out. I mentioned this in the review of episode 11, but we are doing a poll right now for a bracket type episode that we're going to be doing for Star Wars characters. We are taking your opinions for who your favorite Star Wars character is in almost every medium, from films to TV shows to video games, from Legends, canon, animated, live action. We're taking all of it, and we are going to do a bracket with all of you, determining who the winner is. And we'll be making a video on that in December, but right now we're polling for who is going to be in that bracket and from which film and series they will be from. So make sure you vote on the polls. There are going to be 2 coming out every single day. So stay tuned for those polls in the community section. We put out a ton of stuff for you over there. We want to hear your thoughts. So if you haven't yet, comment below. Let us know what you think is going to happen in the finale next week of Andor. Like the video and then subscribe to the channel. So thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.